A wealthy CEO wrongfully fires his black assistant after getting her pregnant. 17 years later, he attends an event at a local school and is shocked to see a black boy that looks like his old assistant. Zara sat across from Justin Anderson in his spacious office, her stomach churning. The polished mahogany desk, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, the gleaming awards on the wall, everything screamed power and success. But the look on Justin's face wasn't celebratory. It was cold, detached. "I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go, Zara," he said, his voice even, as if he were announcing a minor change in lunch plans. She blinked, her mind reeling. "What? Justin, you can't be serious. You promised me the promotion. You said..." Her words stumbled over the disbelief knotting her throat. She had given everything to this job. To him. Late nights, early mornings, all while believing in the promises he'd whispered over dinner meetings and quiet moments in his office. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Things have changed. The board's been cutting budgets, and we've had to make some difficult decisions." Zara clenched her fists on her lap, fighting to keep her composure. "You're firing me because I'm pregnant, aren't you?" Her voice shook with barely contained fury. "You think this is going to cause a scandal? Ruin your precious image?" Justin's expression tightened for a split second before his mask of indifference slid back into place. "Your personal situation has nothing to do with this, Zara. It's purely a business decision." "Business decision?" she echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You're really going to stand there and act like this has nothing to do with the fact that I'm having your child?" His eyes flickered, but he remained silent. "I trusted you, Justin. You told me I was more than just an assistant. You made me believe we had a future," she continued, her voice rising. "And now, because you're scared it might hurt your reputation, you're throwing me out like I'm nothing." He leaned forward, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "Keep your voice down, Zara. This isn't helping." "Helping?" Her voice cracked. "Do you know what you're doing to me? I've spent years working my way up, all for you to turn around and ruin everything. What am I supposed to do now?" "You'll get a severance package," he said, as if that were a solution. "You're a smart woman. You'll land on your feet." Zara stood, hands trembling. "You think a check is going to fix this? I'm pregnant, Justin. I'm going to have a child. Your child. What am I supposed to tell them when they ask where their father is?" Justin's jaw clenched. "I don't want to discuss this any further, Zara. Take the severance. Move on." Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. "You're a coward. You can hide behind your desk and your money, but this will catch up to you. I'll make sure of it." He sighed, looking at her with something that almost resembled pity. "This is how it has to be." Without another word, Zara turned on her heel and stormed out, her heart pounding with a mixture of rage and despair. She had given Justin everything, believed in him, and now he was willing to erase her, erase their child, just to protect his perfect image. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Zara made a silent vow. Justin Anderson might think he could get away with this, but she would make sure he regretted underestimating her. One day, he'd have to face the consequences of his choices. She placed a hand on her pregnant belly. For now, she had to focus on what mattered most, building a life for her child, one that didn't rely on the empty promises of a man who valued his reputation over the people who trusted him. 17 years later, Jaden Williams burst through the door of their small Brooklyn apartment. His face lit up with excitement. He dropped his backpack by the entrance, barely taking a moment to kick off his shoes before rushing into the living room. "Mom! You won't believe who I met today," he called out, his voice bouncing off the walls of their modest home. Zara looked up from her spot on the couch, where she was folding laundry. She offered him a tired but warm smile, the kind that always made him feel like everything was going to be okay, no matter what. "Who's got you all worked up?" she asked, her tone teasing. Jaden plopped down beside her, his eyes sparkling. "Justin Anderson, the CEO of Anderson Pharmaceuticals. He came to our school for career day." Zara froze, her hand hovering over a pile of socks. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Justin Anderson? What was he doing at your school?" Jaden didn't seem to notice her sudden stillness. "He was there to talk about business and entrepreneurship. You should have seen it, Mom. He walked in and everyone just went silent. It was like he had this presence, you know." He sat up straighter, imitating Justin's commanding stance. "He talked about how he built his company from nothing, how he's always looking for new talent. He even made a joke about how he might hire some of us someday." Zara's chest tightened. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to smile as if this were just another ordinary conversation. "Sounds like he made an impression." "Yeah, he did. But that's not all." Jaden leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I think he noticed me, Mom. I swear. He looked right at me a few times, like he was, I don't know, like he saw something." Zara's heart was pounding now, the blood rushing in her ears. She placed a hand on Jaden's arm, trying to ground herself. What do you mean? He noticed you. I don't know, Jaden said, his brow furrowing as he tried to explain. It was just this feeling, like he was looking for something, and when he saw me, he found it. Does that make sense? Zara swallowed, her mouth dry. Did you talk to him? Jaden shook his head. No, there were too many people around. But I'm telling you, Mom, it was weird. In a good way, though. Like, maybe he sees potential in me. Zara's hands began to tremble. She set the laundry aside, clasping them together in her lap. Jaden, I need to tell you something. He looked at her, his excitement dimming as he noticed her expression. What's wrong? Nothing. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to smile. I'm just surprised, that's all. You've never mentioned being interested in business before. Jaden shrugged. Yeah, but after today I've been thinking, maybe I should look into it. I mean, if someone like Justin Anderson thinks I've got potential, stop. The word came out sharper than she intended, and Jaden flinched. What? What's wrong? Zara closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather herself. This wasn't how she'd imagined this conversation happening. She wasn't prepared, but how could she ever be? Jaden, you need to be careful around people like Justin Anderson, she said quietly. He frowned, confusion replacing the excitement in his eyes. Why? He's a successful guy. Isn't that what we're supposed to look up to? Zara felt a wave of nausea roll through her. How could she explain the truth without shattering everything? How could she protect him from the pain that she had endured? The betrayal that still ached like an old wound. He's not what he seems, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. People like him. They're dangerous in ways you can't see. Jaden looked at her, his eyes searching her face for answers she wasn't ready to give. What are you talking about, Mom? You're acting like you know him. She hesitated, then forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow even to her own ears. I've just seen enough corporate types in my life to know that they don't get to the top without stepping on a few people. Jaden's face softened. I get that, but it doesn't mean I can't learn something from them, right? Zara nodded slowly, her heart aching. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? Don't put people like him on a pedestal. They're not always what they appear to be. Okay, I promise, Jaden said, his voice gentle. But seriously, Mom, don't worry. I'm just excited, that's all. Zara tried to smile, but the tightness in her chest wouldn't ease. I know, sweetheart, I know. Jaden leaned back, his excitement returning. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll be running my own company, making deals, flying around the world. Maybe, Zara said, her voice barely a whisper. Just remember where you came from. He grinned, nudging her playfully. I will, don't worry. You're stuck with me. Zara watched him, her heart heavy with fear and love. As Jaden continued talking about his day, she listened, but her mind was elsewhere. Justin had seen Jaden, and if she knew him at all, that look wasn't about seeing potential. It was recognition. She had to think. She had to figure out how to protect Jaden from the truth she'd hidden for so long, a truth that was now dangerously close to coming out, because Justin Anderson might have noticed Jaden today, but he still didn't know, and Zara intended to keep it that way, no matter what. Zara sat at the kitchen table long after Jaden had gone to bed, staring at the clock on the wall. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator. She wrapped her hands around her mug, the tea inside long gone cold, and tried to calm the turmoil inside her. How had everything unraveled so quickly? One moment she was finally feeling secure, her job stable, Jaden thriving at school, and now, Justin. He was back, looming over their lives like a dark shadow, threatening to destroy the peace she had worked so hard to build. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes. She couldn't keep hiding this from Jaden. He had to know the truth. She had always promised herself she'd tell him when he was old enough to understand, but the right time never seemed to come. Now, with Justin showing interest in him, there was no more time left. Zara glanced at the hallway, where Jaden's bedroom door was slightly ajar. She stood, her heart heavy, and walked slowly to his room. She paused in the doorway, watching him sleep, his face peaceful in the soft glow of the nightlight. He looked so young, so innocent. She hated the thought of burdening him with the ugly truth, but she couldn't protect him by keeping him in the dark any longer. She had to tell him, no matter how much it hurt. Jaden, she whispered, stepping into the room. He stirred, blinking up at her sleepily. Mom? What's going on? Can I talk to you for a minute? She asked, her voice barely steady. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. Sure. What's wrong? Zara took a deep breath and sat on the edge of his bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked down, unable to meet his eyes just yet. Remember what we talked about earlier? About Justin Anderson? She began slowly. Jaden nodded, his brow furrowing. Yeah. You were acting weird about it. What's going on, Mom? She swallowed hard, feeling her heart race. There's something I need to tell you about him, about why I reacted the way I did. Okay, Jaden said cautiously, his voice uncertain. Justin Anderson is... She paused, the words catching in her throat. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head, but now that it was here, it felt impossible. He's your father, Jaden. Jaden's eyes widened, confusion and disbelief flashing across his face. What? No, that doesn't make any sense. How could he be? I know it's a lot to take in, she interrupted gently. I never told you because I wanted to protect you. I didn't want you to be hurt by the truth. But and how? Jaden stammered, shaking his head. He's this big CEO. Why? Why wouldn't he be in my life if he's my father? Zara's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She had wanted so badly to spare him this, but now there was no going back. Because he didn't want us, Jaden. He didn't want you. When I told him I was pregnant, he fired me. He wanted to keep his perfect life intact, and we didn't fit into that picture. Jaden sat back, staring at her in shock. You're saying he just abandoned us? Why didn't you ever tell me? I didn't want you to feel unwanted, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. I didn't want you to grow up knowing that the man who should have been there for you chose his career over his family. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes focused on the blanket bunched in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. So he just threw us away? Yes, Zara said, her voice breaking. And I'm so sorry, Jaden. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was just protecting myself. Jaden looked up at her, his eyes filled with hurt and anger. So, all this time, you knew who he was, and you just let me... He stopped, his breath catching. All those times I talked about wanting to know my dad, you knew, and you didn't say anything? I know, she said, tears streaming down her cheeks now. I'm sorry, Jaden. I should have told you. He turned away, staring at the wall. I thought maybe he was dead, or that he just didn't know about me. But he knew, and he didn't care. Zara reached out to touch his shoulder, but he flinched away. I'm so sorry, she repeated, her voice thick with emotion. I wanted to give you a happy childhood to keep you safe from the truth. Jaden shook his head, his jaw clenched. Safe? From the truth? Mom, I'm almost 18. I deserve to know. I know, she whispered, feeling helpless, unable to take back the years of silence. I didn't want you to feel like you were missing something, or that you weren't enough. Jaden turned back to her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. And now that I know, what am I supposed to do? Zara took a deep breath, steeling herself. I don't know. I wish I had the answers. But whatever you decide to do, I'll be here. We'll figure it out together. He looked at her, searching her face for a long moment before finally nodding. I need time to think. Of course, she said softly. Take all the time you need. She stood, feeling a crushing weight on her chest, and turned to leave. Before she reached the door, Jaden spoke again, his voice tight and angry. I want to meet him. I want to ask him why. Zara froze, her hand gripping the doorframe. Jaden, I don't think that's a good idea. Justin, he's not the kind of person who's going to give you the answers you're looking for. I don't care, Jaden said, his voice hard. He needs to see me. He needs to know what he did. Zara closed her eyes, fighting back her own emotions. Okay, if that's what you want, we'll find a way. But please, promise me you'll be careful. Jaden's expression was fierce, determined. I'm not afraid of him, Mom. He's just a man. Zara nodded, though fear twisted in her stomach. I know, but he's a man with a lot of power. And I don't want you to get hurt. I've already been hurt, Jaden said quietly. But I need to do this. Zara looked at him, her heart breaking for the boy she had tried so hard to protect. Okay, she said finally. We'll do it together. But you have to promise me you won't go looking for him alone. He nodded reluctantly. I promise. Zara gave him a small, sad smile. We'll figure it out, Jaden. We always do. As she left his room, closing the door softly behind her, she felt a terrible weight settle over her. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. All she could do was hope that they could face what came next, together. Jaden sat at the dining table, his textbook spread out in front of him. He was supposed to be studying for a math test, but his eyes kept drifting to his phone. Since learning the truth, he had been wrestling with a storm of emotions. Anger, confusion, and a sense of betrayal that gnawed at him every waking moment. Zara watched him from the kitchen, worry etched on her face. She knew he was struggling, but every time she tried to talk to him, he brushed her off. The tension between them had been thick since their conversation a few nights ago, and she didn't know how to reach him. Finally, unable to stand the silence any longer, she wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked over to the table. Jaden, she said gently, sitting down across from him. We need to talk. He glanced up, his eyes guarded. About what? About what we're going to do next, she said, choosing her words carefully. I know you're upset, and I understand why, but I don't want you to rush into anything without thinking it through. Jaden's jaw tightened. You think I haven't thought about it? No, She hesitated, then sighed. I don't want you to do something you'll regret. Confronting Justin, it's not going to be as simple as you think. Why not? Jaden's voice was sharp, his frustration boiling over. I deserve answers. I want to look him in the eye and ask him why he left us. Why he left you. Zara swallowed hard, the pain of the past still raw in her memory. I know, honey, but he's not going to give you what you want. He's not that kind of man. So what? I'm just supposed to let him get away with it? Jaden's eyes flashed with anger. He's been living his life like we don't exist. And I'm supposed to just accept that? Zara felt a pang of guilt. I never said you have to accept it, but confronting him could have consequences. He has a lot of influence, and he's not afraid to use it. Mom, I don't care about his power or his influence, Jaden said, his voice firm. I'm not afraid of him. Zara reached across the table, her hand covering his. I know you're not, but I am. I'm scared of what he might do if he feels threatened. He's ruthless, Jaden. You saw what he did to us. Jaden looked down at their hands, his anger softening just a bit. But I can't just do nothing, Mom. I need to know why he did it. Why he didn't want us. Zara's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She squeezed his hand, searching for the right words. Sometimes people do things that don't make sense. They're selfish, they're scared, and they make choices that hurt others. But that's about them, not you. Justin's decision had nothing to do with you or your worth. Jaden pulled his hand away, his face set with determination. I still want to talk to him. I need to. Zara sighed, knowing there was no changing his mind. Okay, but we need to be smart about it. If you go to him directly, it could get messy. He'll do whatever it takes to protect his image. Jaden frowned. So what do we do? Zara thought for a moment, then leaned forward. We need to make him come to us. If he thinks you know more than you do, he'll want to meet you. He'll want to control the situation. Jaden's eyes widened as he realized what she was suggesting. You mean, I should make him think I have something on him? She nodded slowly. He needs to believe that you're a threat to his reputation. That way, he'll reach out first. And when he does, we'll be ready. Jaden sat back, his mind racing. How do I do that? Zara looked at him seriously. You write to him, an anonymous letter. Mention things that only he would know. Things from the time we were together, but don't say who you are. Let him wonder. Jaden considered this, a spark of excitement mingling with his anger. And then what? Then we wait, Zara said softly. He'll reach out, and when he does, we'll decide what to do. Jaden nodded slowly, the plan taking shape in his mind. Okay, I'll do it. I'll make him come to me. Zara watched him, a mix of pride and fear in her heart. Just promise me one thing, Jaden. What? Promise me you won't go to him alone. I need to know you're safe. Jaden hesitated, then nodded. I promise, Mom. Thank you. Jaden stood, a new resolve in his eyes. I'm going to write that letter. Zara watched him head to his room, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. She had wanted to protect him from this for so long, but now she could only hope that they were making the right choice. Justin Anderson was not a man to be underestimated, and she knew better than anyone what he was capable of. As she listened to the sound of Jaden typing furiously on his keyboard, she prayed that they were prepared for whatever came next. Because once Justin knew who Jaden was, there would be no turning back. Jaden sat at his desk, staring at the letter he had just finished writing. The words on the page seemed to burn into his mind, each line etched with the anger and frustration that had been building inside him since his mother revealed the truth about Justin Anderson. He had rewritten the letter 3 times, each version more intense than the last. This final draft was short and direct, just as Zara had advised. No threats, no demands, just enough information to unsettle Justin, to make him realize that his past wasn't as buried as he thought. Jaden read it again, his heart pounding. You don't know me, but I know you. I know what you did 17 years ago, and I know why you did it. You thought you could erase us, but you were wrong. I'm not going to let you get away with it anymore. You owe us, and it's time to pay up. His hands shaking as he folded the paper and slipped it into an envelope. It wasn't enough just to send this. It had to reach Justin directly, not get lost in the chaos of corporate mailrooms. He had decided to send it to Justin's personal assistant, someone who would make sure it landed right on the CEO's desk. He glanced at his phone, checking the time. It was late, but he knew he couldn't wait any longer. The longer he held on to the letter, the more doubts crept in, and he couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. Mom, he called softly, stepping out of his room and into the living room where Zara was reading on the couch. I'm going to send it. Zara looked up, her eyes filled with concern. Are you sure you're ready? He nodded. Yeah, I have to do this. She stood up and crossed the room, pulling him into a hug. I'm proud of you, Jaden. Just be prepared for whatever happens. Justin won't just let this go. Jaden hugged her back, feeling a swell of determination. I know. But I can't just let him keep pretending we don't exist. He needs to face what he did. Zara nodded, releasing him. Okay, let's do this. They drove to the nearest post office, the city lights blurring past them as they rode in silence. Jaden clutched the envelope tightly, his mind racing with 1,000 scenarios of how Justin might react. Would he ignore it? Would he try to deny everything? Or would he finally admit what he'd done? The clerk at the counter barely glanced at them as Jaden handed over the envelope, asking for it to be sent with priority service. He watched as the clerk weighed it, printed a label, and finally dropped it into the outgoing mail bin. Just like that, it was out of his hands. Back in the car, Jaden stared out the window, his mind still buzzing. It's done, he said quietly. Zara reached over and squeezed his hand. You did the right thing, Jaden. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it together. He nodded, but the tension in his chest didn't ease. They drove home in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The next few days were torture. Jaden found it hard to focus at school, his thoughts constantly drifting back to the letter. He checked his phone obsessively, half expecting a call or text from an unknown number. He knew it was irrational. Justin wouldn't contact him directly even if he wanted to, but still, he couldn't shake the anticipation that hung over him like a storm cloud. Zara watched him closely, her own anxiety mirrored in the tightness of her smile, the way she lingered near the phone as if waiting for it to ring. They tried to keep things normal, going through their usual routines, but the unspoken tension between them was palpable. Then, on the 4th day after sending the letter, it happened. Jaden was in his room, attempting to study, when he heard Zara's phone ring. He froze, listening as she answered, her voice tense. Hello? Yes, this is Zara Williams. There was a long pause, and Jaden's heart began to race. He stood up, moving to the doorway, straining to hear. Yes, I understand, Zara said, her voice carefully neutral. No, that's not necessary. I appreciate the offer, but I'd prefer to handle this privately. Another pause. Jaden could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Fine, Zara said finally, her tone firm. I'll be there, but I'm not promising anything. She hung up, her face pale as she turned and saw Jaden standing there. Was that him? Jaden asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zara nodded, her expression grim. His assistant. Justin wants to meet. Tomorrow. Jaden's heart leaped into his throat. He wants to meet me? No, Zara said, her voice tight. He wants to meet me. He wants to know who you are, but he doesn't know yet. I told them I'd meet him alone. Jaden felt a surge of frustration. But I'm the one who sent the letter. I'm the one he should be talking to. I know, Zara said softly. But this is how it has to be, Jaden. Let me talk to him first. We don't know how he's going to react. And I don't want you anywhere near him until I'm sure it's safe. Jaden shook his head, anger bubbling up inside him. This isn't fair, Mom. He's my father. I have a right to confront him. Zara stepped closer, her eyes pleading. I know, honey. But please, let me do this my way. I need to see him first, to make sure he understands that you're not someone he can just brush off. Jaden clenched his fists, every muscle in his body taut with frustration. What are you going to say to him? I'm going to tell him the truth, she said simply, that you're his son, that he can't ignore you anymore, and that we're not going to be silenced. Jaden stared at her, his anger mingling with fear and uncertainty. What if he tries to buy you off, or threatens you? Zara's eyes hardened. He can't buy me, Jaden, and he doesn't scare me anymore. Not after what he did. Jaden hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay, but if he tries anything, I want to know. I promise, Zara said, reaching out to touch his cheek. I'll tell you everything. We're in this together. Jaden took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. Okay, I trust you, Mom. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Thank you. Zara sat alone at a corner table in the small, dimly lit cafe, her eyes fixed on the door. The place was quiet, with only a few patrons scattered around, sipping coffee or typing on laptops. It was the kind of place where people came to be alone in a crowd, the perfect setting for a discreet meeting. Her heart raced, the steady thump echoing in her ears as she waited. She glanced at her watch. Justin was 5 minutes late. She wasn't surprised. He was always careful to maintain control, to make people wait. But this time, she wasn't going to be the one left waiting. She took a sip of her tea, the bitter taste grounding her as she replayed the conversation she had had with Jaden the night before. She had seen the hurt and anger in his eyes, the raw need for answers that only Justin could provide. She had to do this for Jaden's sake, even though every instinct told her to run as far from Justin Anderson as she could. The door chimed, and she looked up to see him walk in. Justin Anderson was as impeccably dressed as ever, his tailored suit fitting him perfectly, his silver hair combed back with precision. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on her. For a moment, their eyes locked, and she saw a flicker of something, unease, maybe even fear, before his expression settled into its usual mask of confidence. He made his way over, his steps deliberate and measured, as if he were still the man in control. Zara's stomach churned, but she kept her face neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. "Zara," he said as he reached the table, his voice smooth, practiced. He pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down, not waiting for an invitation. "Justin," she replied, her tone cool. He looked at her for a moment, then gestured to the waiter. "Just a coffee, Black," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. The waiter nodded and hurried off. Zara watched him. The familiarity of his movements, the way he leaned back slightly in his chair, exuding an air of calm control. But she knew better. She had seen the cracks in that facade before. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his eyes studying her. "I wasn't sure I would either," she admitted. "But you left me with little choice." He nodded, a hint of regret in his eyes. "I suppose I did." There was a silence between them, heavy with unspoken words. The waiter returned with Justin's coffee, and he took a sip before speaking again. "So, Zara," he began, setting the cup down carefully, "why don't we start with the obvious? Why now? After all these years?" Zara felt a surge of anger. His tone was almost casual, as if this were just another business negotiation. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "Why now?" she repeated, her voice low but steady. "Because you've been living your life like nothing happened, like we didn't exist. I've watched you build your empire, watched you in the news, giving interviews, talking about your success, your philanthropy. And all the while you never once thought about what you left behind." Justin's face tightened, a flicker of something crossing his features. Guilt, maybe, or just discomfort. "Zara, I'm not proud of what I did, but I had to make choices. Difficult ones. My career." "Don't," she interrupted sharply. "Don't you dare try to justify this as a business decision. This wasn't about your career. This was about you being a coward." He flinched, and she felt a grim satisfaction. "I was trying to protect everyone involved," he said quietly, "including you." "Protect me?" Zara laughed, a bitter sound. "You ruined me, Justin. You fired me, blacklisted me. I had to start from scratch, rebuild everything, and I did it. Without you." He looked down at his coffee, his fingers tightening around the cup. "I know. I've followed your career. You've done well. Don't patronize me," she snapped. "I'm not here for your approval." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers again. "Then why are you here, Zara? What do you want?" Zara took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I want you to face what you did, to acknowledge your son. He's the one who sent you that letter, Justin. Jaden." Justin's face paled slightly, and for a moment he looked almost human, vulnerable. "I thought it might be him," he said slowly, "but I wasn't sure." "Well, now you know," Zara said, her voice hard. "He's your son, and he's not going to be ignored." Justin leaned back, his gaze searching her face. "And what does he want? Money?" Zara's eyes blazed. "No, he doesn't want your money. He wants to know why you abandoned him. Why you left us with nothing." Justin rubbed a hand over his face, looking suddenly older, more tired. "Zara, I was in a difficult position. My career, my family." "You had no family then," she shot back. "You had me. You had us. And you threw it away because it wasn't convenient for you." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't that simple." "It was exactly that simple," she said, leaning forward. "You chose yourself, your career, your reputation, over your own child." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. "I thought I was doing what was best. For everyone." Zara shook her head, feeling the weight of all the years of silence and pain pressing down on her. "You didn't do what was best for anyone but yourself, Justin. And now, you're going to face the consequences." "What do you want me to do, Zara?" he asked quietly. "What can I do now, after all this time?" "I want you to meet him," she said firmly. "I want you to look your son in the eye and tell him why you walked away. Why you thought your reputation was worth more than his life." Justin's face twisted, pain and regret flashing in his eyes. "You think that will help him?" "No," Zara said honestly, "but it's a start. He deserves that much." He looked down at his hands, his voice a whisper. "And then what?" "And then you live with it," she said coldly. "You live with knowing that your son sees you for who you really are." He was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, strained. "I want to make things right, Zara. I know I can't change the past, but I can help him now. A trust fund for his education, his future." "No," Zara said sharply. "He doesn't want your money. He wants your honesty." Justin looked up at her, his eyes filled with something close to desperation. I'll meet him. I'll talk to him. But please, Zara, don't go to the press. Don't destroy everything I've built. Zara stared at him, her heart hardening. Why shouldn't I? You destroyed everything for me. Why shouldn't I do the same? He flinched, and she saw the fear in his eyes. Please, he whispered. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you. Don't do this. Zara looked at him, the man who had once meant everything to her, now reduced to pleading for his reputation. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a deep, weary sadness. I'm not making any promises, she said finally. Jaden and I will decide what happens next, not you. Justin nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. Okay, I understand. Zara stood up, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. I'll call you when he's ready to meet. And Justin, if you hurt him again, I won't hesitate. I'll make sure the whole world knows who you really are. He looked up at her, his face pale and drawn. I won't hurt him, I swear. She nodded, turning to leave. As she walked away, she felt a strange sense of relief, as if a door had finally closed on a chapter of her life that had haunted her for years. She had faced him, and she hadn't backed down. Now it was up to Jaden to decide what came next. And whatever he chose, she would be there, standing by his side. Because they were done hiding. They were done being erased. And Justin Anderson was about to learn that some things couldn't be buried forever. Zara sat at the kitchen table, her fingers drumming anxiously against the wooden surface. It had been 3 days since her meeting with Justin, and the tension in the apartment was almost unbearable. She and Jaden had talked about everything, what Justin had said, what he had offered, and what it meant for them, but no decision had been made. And Zara could see the frustration building in her son. Jaden stood by the window, staring out at the street below. His shoulders were tense, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He hadn't said much since she'd told him about the meeting. He had listened quietly, his face unreadable, as she recounted Justin's apology, his offer of a trust fund, and his plea to keep things private. Now, as he turned to face her, Zara braced herself for whatever he was about to say. So, what do we do now? Jaden asked, his voice strained with pent-up emotion. Are we really just going to let him get away with this? Zara took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I don't know, Jaden. I want to do what's best for you, for us. But I also don't want to make a decision out of anger. He frowned, his frustration evident. But he's not going to change, Mom. He's just trying to buy us off so we stay quiet. It's like we don't matter to him at all. Like we're just a problem he needs to manage. Zara's heart ached at the pain in his voice. I know, sweetheart. But going public with this, there are risks. He's powerful. He could make things very difficult for us. Jaden shook his head, his eyes flashing with anger. I don't care about his power. I'm not afraid of him. I just want him to face what he did. I want people to know the truth. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. I understand that, but you have to think about what that will mean for you, for your future. The media won't be kind, Jaden. They'll dig into our lives, twist things, make it all about scandal and drama. He looked at her, his expression fierce. Let them. I don't care what they say about me. I just don't want him to get away with it. Zara sighed, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. I'm not saying we should stay quiet forever, but maybe there's another way. Maybe we can get him to acknowledge you, to take responsibility without turning this into a media circus. Jaden's face tightened with frustration. You think he's just going to admit it? Just like that? No, she admitted. But I think we can use the fact that he's scared right now. He's worried about his reputation, about what this could do to his career. If we go public, he'll fight back with everything he has. But if we push him the right way, he might be willing to make concessions, acknowledge you, maybe even agree to a public statement. Jaden scoffed. You really think he's going to do that? Zara looked at him, her eyes softening. I think he's more afraid of losing his empire than anything else. And if we're smart, we can use that to our advantage. He was silent for a moment, his jaw clenched. And if he doesn't, what then? Then we go public, she said firmly. If he won't meet us halfway, if he refuses to acknowledge you, then we take everything to the media. But I want to give him a chance first. Not for him, but for you. Because once we cross that line, there's no going back. Jaden stared at her, the anger in his eyes slowly giving way to something more thoughtful, more contemplative. You really think he's going to listen? Zara shrugged. I don't know, but I think it's worth trying before we do something that could change our lives forever. He nodded slowly, turning back to the window. Okay, we'll try it your way. But if he blows us off, if he tries to weasel out of this, I'm done being nice. Zara stood and walked over to him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. I know you're angry, Jaden, and you have every right to be. But this isn't just about hurting him back. It's about making sure he doesn't get to pretend we don't exist. He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. I just want him to see me, Mom. to know that I'm real, that I'm his son. Zara's heart broke a little more at the raw pain in his voice. He will, Jaden. I promise you, he will. They stood there for a long moment, the silence between them filled with unspoken words, with the weight of everything they had been through. Finally, Jaden nodded. Okay, he said softly. So what's the plan? Zara took a deep breath, feeling a sense of resolve settle over her. We're going to meet with him again, both of us. You're going to tell him exactly how you feel, what you want, and we're going to make it clear that this is his last chance to do the right thing. And if he doesn't? Jaden asked, his voice steady. Then we go public, Zara said, her voice firm. We take everything we have to the press, the letters, the emails, everything. We'll make sure everyone knows the truth. Jaden nodded, a fierce determination in his eyes. Okay, let's do it. Zara reached out and pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly. Whatever happens, we're in this together. I love you, Jaden. I love you too, Mom, he murmured, his voice muffled against her shoulder. They stood like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other, preparing for the battle that lay ahead. They had come too far to back down now, and Zara knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Because this wasn't just about Justin anymore. It was about Jaden, about making sure he knew he mattered, that he had a voice, and Zara would do whatever it took to make sure he was heard. Zara and Jaden entered the conference room at the hotel, a quiet, formal space with a large table at its center. The room overlooked the city skyline, sunlight streaming in through the tall windows. Justin Anderson was already there, standing near the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He turned as they approached, his face composed, though Zara could see the tension in his posture. Thank you for coming, Justin said, his voice calm, almost tentative. He gestured to the chairs. Please have a seat. Zara nodded and sat down, Jaden following suit beside her. His body was stiff, and his eyes were glued to Justin, studying his every move. Zara reached over and placed a hand on Jaden's arm, a silent gesture to remind him to stay calm. Justin sat across from them, his gaze lingering on Jaden. I'm glad we could meet like this, he began, his voice steady, but with an undercurrent of uncertainty. I've thought a lot about what you said, Zara. I know I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and I'm here to make amends. Zara folded her hands on the table, her voice measured. We're not here for apologies, Justin. We're here to talk about Jaden, about what he needs. Justin nodded, his eyes flicking back to Jaden. Of course. Jaden, I can't change the past, but I want to be part of your life now, to help you in any way I can. Jaden's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. What exactly does that mean? Helping me, because I don't think money is going to fix what you did. Justin held up a hand. I understand that. But I want to ensure your future, to support you in whatever path you choose. I can help with your education, career opportunities, anything you need. Jaden glanced at his mother, then back at Justin. And what do you get out of this? Justin hesitated, then sighed. I'm not going to lie, Jaden. This situation is complicated. If it became public, it could hurt a lot of people, not just me. But that's not why I'm here. I genuinely want to do what's right by you. Jaden leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. So you're only worried about us going public because it would hurt your reputation? Justin frowned, shaking his head. No, that's not it. I'm concerned about you, about the impact this would have on your life. The media can be ruthless, and I don't want you to go through that. Jaden's lips pressed into a thin line. I've already been through worse thanks to you. Zara felt the tension building and interjected softly. Jaden, let's hear him out. Jaden glanced at her, then back at Justin, his eyes narrowing. Fine. Talk. Justin took a deep breath. I want to create a trust fund for you, Jaden. It would cover your education and set you up for the future. You'd never have to worry about money again. I'd also like to establish a mentorship program for young people, something in your name if you'd like, that could help other kids in similar situations. Jaden's brow furrowed, his voice cautious. Why now? Why after all this time do you suddenly want to be helpful? Justin's gaze softened. Because I've seen what you've become, Jaden. You're smart, driven. I missed out on all those years, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now, and I want to do whatever I can to support you. Jaden leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Justin's. You're here now because I forced you to be. If I hadn't sent that letter, you'd still be pretending we don't exist. Justin flinched, then nodded slowly. You're right, and I'm sorry. I was wrong to stay away. I was wrong to leave you and your mother alone, but I want to make it right. There was a long silence. Zara watched Jaden, seeing the conflict in his eyes, the war between anger and the deep, unfulfilled need for answers. She held her breath, waiting for his response. Make it right? Jaden's voice was low, strained. How do you make up for abandoning us? For firing my mom because she was pregnant with me? Justin swallowed, his gaze dropping to the table. I can't change what I did. I can only try to do better now. Jaden shook his head, his voice trembling. You don't get it. You destroyed her career. You made it so she couldn't even work in her field again. We struggled because of you. Justin's face tightened, his calm facade beginning to crack. I know, and I've regretted it every day. Jaden's eyes blazed. No, you haven't. You didn't even think about us until I sent that letter. You were happy living your life, forgetting about us. That's not true, Justin said, his voice rising slightly. I thought about you. You just what? Jaden interrupted, leaning forward, his voice hard. You just hoped we'd disappear? That we wouldn't show up and ruin your perfect life? Justin's eyes flashed with something, anger, frustration, maybe even fear. I made a mistake, Jaden. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle it. So you ran, Jaden said, his voice sharp with accusation. You ran away because you were a coward. Justin stiffened, his eyes narrowing. It wasn't that simple. I had to protect everything I'd built, everything I was responsible for. I couldn't let one mistake ruin. One mistake? Jaden's voice exploded with fury. You think I'm just one mistake? You think what you did to us was just some minor screw-up? Justin's face flushed, and he looked away, his jaw clenched. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, Jaden shot back, his voice trembling with rage. You still don't care about us. All you care about is keeping this quiet so no one finds out what a terrible person you really are. Justin's eyes snapped back to Jaden, his voice harsh. That's not true. I'm trying to protect you. No, you're not. Jaden cut him off, standing up. You're trying to protect yourself. You don't care about me. You never have. Justin opened his mouth to respond, but then something in his expression shifted. His eyes darkened, and his voice turned cold. Do you really think dragging this into the public eye is going to solve anything? It's going to hurt everyone involved, including you. Is that what you want? Jaden stared at him, a bitter smile forming on his lips. There it is. That's what you really care about. Your image, your reputation. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. Justin's face twisted, anger flaring in his eyes. You're being reckless. Do you know what this will do to you, to your future? You think the media will leave you alone after this? You'll be dragged through the mud just like everyone else. Jaden's voice was ice cold. I don't care. You should have thought about that before you decided we didn't matter. Zara stood up, her heart pounding. This isn't helping anyone, Justin. We came here hoping you would do the right thing, but you're still trying to control everything. Justin's eyes pleaded with her. Zara, please, don't let him do this. We can work something out. I'll do whatever you want. We're done talking, Justin, Zara said, her voice firm. You've shown us who you really are. You don't care about Jaden. You just want to keep your secrets buried. Jaden nodded, his voice calm now, almost eerily so. We're going public. You had your chance to be honest, and you blew it. Justin's face went pale, panic flashing in his eyes. No, please. You don't understand what this will do. To all of us. Jaden's voice was steady, unyielding. I know exactly what it will do, and I'm ready. He turned and walked out of the room, Zara following close behind. She glanced back once, seeing Justin slumped in his chair, his face pale and stricken. We're done, Justin, she said softly. Whatever happens next, it's on you. As they walked down the hallway, Jaden glanced at her, his expression unreadable. We're really doing this, aren't we? Yes, she said firmly. We are. He took a deep breath, his voice steady. Good. It's time he faced the truth. Zara reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. No matter what happens, we're in this together. Jaden looked at her, his eyes fierce, determined. I know, Mom. And we're going to make sure the world knows what kind of man he really is. They walked out of the hotel, the sun shining brightly above them, ready to face whatever came next. Zara and Jaden sat side by side on their worn living room couch, watching the television as the latest developments of Justin Anderson's scandal unfolded. The news anchor's voice was clear and deliberate, a steady contrast to the chaos the story was causing in the media and the business world. In a shocking series of events, Justin Anderson, CEO of Anderson Pharmaceuticals, is facing mounting allegations of misconduct, including accusations of abandoning his child and blacklisting the child's mother, Zara Williams. Despite his attempts to dismiss these allegations as false and defamatory, pressure is increasing from both within and outside the company. Jaden leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on the screen. He's still trying to lie his way out of it, he muttered, a note of frustration in his voice. How is he still getting away with this? Zara reached over, placing a hand on his arm. It's going to take time, Jaden. People like him don't go down easily. But the truth is, out there now, we did what we needed to do. On the screen, the anchor continued. Justin Anderson has denied all allegations, calling them a malicious attack on his character and integrity. He has filed a lawsuit against the news outlets that first broke the story, claiming defamation and seeking damages. Jaden shook his head in disbelief. Of course he's suing. He thinks he can just bully his way out of this, like he always does. Zara sighed, feeling a familiar weariness settle over her. He's scared. He's trying to control the narrative, but it's not going to work this time. The camera cut to a clip of Justin outside his office, surrounded by reporters. He looked more composed than he had a few days ago, his suit immaculate, his hair perfectly styled, but there was a strain in his eyes, a tightness in his jaw that betrayed the pressure he was under. "This is a baseless smear campaign," Justin said, his voice firm. "I have always conducted myself with the utmost integrity. These accusations are completely unfounded, and I will be taking legal action to protect my reputation and the reputation of Anderson Pharmaceuticals." A reporter's voice cut through the crowd. "Mr. Anderson, what about the evidence presented by Zara Williams and your son Jaden? Are you denying their claims?" Justin's face tightened, his eyes narrowing. "I have no comment on that. This is a private matter, and I will not be discussing it further." The scene shifted back to the anchor. Despite Justin Anderson's denials, sources within Anderson Pharmaceuticals report growing unrest among employees and shareholders. The board of directors is said to be considering their options, with a vote on Anderson's future expected soon. Jaden let out a slow breath. "Do you think they'll actually vote him out?" Zara looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "It's hard to say. He has a lot of power, and he's built that company from the ground up. But this scandal is big, and it's not going away." For the next few days, the media coverage intensified. Justin continued to push back, appearing on several news programs to defend himself. He spoke calmly, confidently, as if the allegations were merely a minor inconvenience, something to be swept aside. "This is a coordinated attack against me and my company," he told one interviewer, his tone firm. "I have always upheld the highest standards of ethics and professionalism. These lies are an attempt to undermine my work and my reputation." Watching him, Zara felt a wave of anger and frustration. How could he stand there, lying so effortlessly, dismissing everything they had been through as nothing more than a smear campaign? She glanced at Jaden, who sat beside her, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with rage. "He's acting like we're just making this up," Jaden said bitterly. "Like we're the bad guys." Zara reached over, squeezing his hand. "He's trying to protect himself, but people can see through it. They know he's hiding something." As the days went by, the pressure on Justin continued to mount. More employees came forward with stories of his ruthless behavior, his willingness to cut corners and manipulate situations to his advantage. Former business partners spoke out, describing how he had betrayed their trust, used them, then discarded them when they were no longer useful. The media began to dig deeper, uncovering other scandals that had been buried over the years. Questionable deals, hushed-up legal disputes, even rumors of bribery. Justin's carefully constructed image as a brilliant but principled businessman was crumbling before the public's eyes. Then, a turning point. An emergency board meeting was called, and the company released a statement announcing that Justin Anderson's position as CEO was under review. It was the first sign that the board was seriously considering removing him. Zara and Jaden watched the news coverage that evening, the tension in their apartment palpable. "It's happening," Jaden said, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and anxiety. "They're finally going to get rid of him." Zara nodded, though she kept her expression cautious. "I hope so, but we need to be prepared. He's not going to go down without a fight." The following morning, news broke that the board had postponed their vote, citing the need for further deliberation. Justin was seen entering the company's headquarters, looking calm and composed, his lawyers by his side. "He's stalling," Jaden muttered, frustration coloring his voice. "He's trying to buy more time." "Maybe," Zara said, "but the more this drags out, the worse it looks for him. The board is under pressure from the shareholders, and they can't ignore that." The days stretched on, with Justin making more public appearances, trying to shore up support. He held a press conference, flanked by a few loyal executives, and reiterated his innocence, calling the allegations a personal vendetta from disgruntled individuals. "We will not be intimidated," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Anderson Pharmaceuticals will continue to operate with the same integrity and excellence that we have always upheld." But even as he spoke, more damning evidence surfaced. Emails and internal documents leaked by anonymous sources, showing how he had used his influence to block Zara from jobs in the industry, how he had manipulated company resources for personal gain. It was clear now that his downfall was not just a matter of bad press, but of criminal wrongdoing. The final blow came when several major investors publicly announced that they were withdrawing their support unless Justin was removed. The board could no longer afford to waver. That evening, as Zara and Jaden sat in their living room, the news anchor appeared on the screen, a breaking news banner scrolling across the bottom. We have just received confirmation that Justin Anderson has been officially removed as CEO of Anderson Pharmaceuticals, following a unanimous vote by the board of directors. This decision comes after weeks of intense scrutiny and public pressure. Sources close to the board say that Anderson's refusal to take responsibility for his actions and the potential legal implications left them with no choice. Jaden let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, turning to look at his mother. "He's really gone," Zara nodded, a sense of relief washing over her. "Yes, it's over." The anchor continued, detailing the company's plans to restructure and rebuild trust with its employees and clients. Justin had been offered a severance package, but it was significantly less than what would have been expected for a CEO of his stature. His reputation was in tatters, his empire crumbling around him. For the first time in what felt like forever, Zara felt something like hope. They had faced down a powerful man, exposed the truth, and won. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control of their own story, about standing up for what was right. Jaden looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "So, what now?" Zara smiled, reaching over to take his hand. "Now, we move forward. We've spent so long fighting, but now it's time to think about us, about what we want." Jaden nodded slowly. "I guess I didn't really think about that. I was so focused on bringing him down. I didn't plan for what happens after." "That's okay," Zara said gently. "We have time now. We can figure it out, together." And they did. Over the next few weeks, as the media frenzy began to fade, they started to make plans. Jaden threw himself into his schoolwork, his excitement for college rekindled. Zara, for the first time in years, felt a sense of peace. She began to consider new opportunities, exploring the possibility of starting her own consulting business, something she had always dreamed of but never had the confidence to pursue. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Jaden turned to her, his eyes bright. "You know, I've been thinking about that trip we talked about." Zara raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh? And where are we going?" He grinned. "Europe. We've never been, and I think it's time we did something just for us. What do you think?" Zara's heart lifted, a smile spreading across her face. "I think it sounds perfect." They spent the next few days planning their trip, researching destinations and dreaming about the adventures they would have together. It felt good to focus on something positive, something that was just for them. A few weeks later, they found themselves at the airport, bags packed and tickets in hand. As they boarded the plane, Jaden turned to Zara, his face lit up with excitement. "We're really doing this," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Zara smiled, her heart full. "Yes, we are. A new beginning, just for us." They settled into their seats, the plane taking off and leaving the city behind. As they soared into the sky, Zara felt a sense of peace wash over her. They had faced their past, confronted their pain, and come out stronger on the other side. As they looked out the window, the world stretching out before them, Jaden turned to his mother, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything." Zara's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I love you too, Jaden. More than you'll ever know." They smiled at each other, the world full of endless possibilities. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was theirs, a new beginning, full of hope and promise. And that, Zara thought as she looked at her son, was more than enough.